All right, so I'm going to get started. If you notice the focus question, it's going to be a little complicated at first, and you have some pictures here that will not make sense, but I think by the end of the lesson it will. So, how did Britain's economic policy of mercantilism start to cause anger in the American colonies? So, let me first start off by saying we are kind of jumping from like the beginning of foundations of American government in like 1619, 1620 to like kind of the mid 1700s. There's a span of about 120 years of American history where it's not really covered in the regions. So we're just going to kind of get into the start of our country, which happens to come throughout the American Revolution. So pretty much you guys have to have a little general background understanding that before the United States of America was the United States of America, we were controlled by Great Britain. Right? This is something you probably remember learning in 7th grade. And we had to listen to Great Britain and their king and their rule while we were in the colonies in some sort of ways. So we're going to see how Britain's economic policy, which we'll go over soon, started to cause anger in the American colonies. All right, so we're going to have a quick do now. I'm going to give you about 3-4 minutes to write down as much as you can. It's really important when you do these do nows. I mean, I really can't see a lot of you, but it's important for you to do them because this is going to help jog your memory a little bit for the lesson today. All right, so the do now is this. Before Britain took over the 13 colonies, before the colonies were broken up into 3 sections. Okay, what were the names of these 3 sections, and what do you remember about these 3 sections? Like, what was the climate like? What was religion? What are just some things that you remember? This could be from your geography notes. This could be from last year, whatever you want. So you're going to use this map to help you answer. Okay, working on some map skills right now. You're going to use this map to help you answer the first question, and then tell me what you remember about these 3 particular sections. All right, it's 8:31. I'm going to give you 8:34 to work on it. All right, so go ahead. Again, use the map to help you. What do you remember from 7th grade? What do you remember from the geography lessons? I think 1 or 2 of you may have just trickled in a little late. I am recording the lesson, so you can always go back and get the focus question on the YouTube a little bit later today. But right now, we're working on a do now. So take a look at it quick. I'll give everyone 1 more minute. So let's go over these. What were the names of these three sections? Well, this was just a little bit of map skills. You know, sometimes don't underestimate the power of being able to look at a map and being able to figure out. You have a key on the left here that names the three sections of colonies. So in red, you have the New England colonies. In orange, you have the middle colonies. That's where New York is located. And then in the south, you have the southern colonies in green. All right, so first, the New England colonies. We should remember some of this from geography. They have good harbors. They have a lot of trees up in the New England colonies, and they have a lot of fishing. If you go up, if you've ever gone up to Massachusetts or up north to the New England area now, they have a lot of lobster rolls. They have a lot of baked clams, a lot of fish that you can eat. New England clam chowder, okay, is like a fishy type of soup that's obviously found in this region here. So that was what they were known for. A harbor is an area where a lot of boats and ships are going to come into an area to trade. This is why Boston, Massachusetts became such an influential part of the American Revolution, as we'll learn, because that's where a lot of the harbors took place. All right, the climate in New England is generally very cold. Even in this part of the year, September, it's going to be a little colder than it is in New York. But for the most part, it's one of the colder areas of the country. All right, so if you try to farm in New England, it's going to be a lot harder than it is in the South. All right. Number two is the middle colonies. I really don't need you to write this. This is just us getting a better understanding. If you have, whatever you have is fine. It was settled by the Dutch and the Quakers, so not as many British colonists are coming into that area. More of the British people are going to the South, and they're going to New England, but we did have a mixture of peoples here. We don't have a cold climate. We don't have a tropical climate. We have what's called a temperate climate, meaning the middle colonies were kind of cold, kind of hot. Depends the type of the year. And we had a mix of farming. Like if you were to go to parts of New York, okay, like upstate New York, you would see a lot of farmland. But we also had a lot of trees as well. So we kind of have the best of both worlds. Okay, we have kind of like a New England-based area, but also this farming as well, like the South. The southern colonies, excuse me one second. So the southern colonies has tons of farmland, and plantations help to grow crops. So plantations are extremely large farms. Okay, you have a lot of farmland. You have a person or a family that owns the plantation, and hopefully you realize they needed slaves to work on those plantations. So this is why the South had so much slavery early on in our country. If you went to the New England colonies or the middle colonies, you very rarely see any slaves. In fact, you probably, some colonies like Connecticut wouldn't even have any, okay, in the 1700s. The South, the weather was very warm, so that meant the climate was a lot different than the people from Great Britain. So when they got to the places like the southern colonies, since they're not used to the climate, farming was a lot more difficult. You have situations where a lot more people got sick in the southern colonies because they weren't used to the climate. But over time, as generations grew, they started to get used to it, and things got a lot better. Okay? So we have the three colonies, and the one question I'm going to ask you, just as a clarifying question, I've kind of mentioned it already. What group or what country owned the 13 colonies prior to the American Revolution? Because it's not America. So in the chat, what group owned the 13 colonies before America did? What group or what country? What group or country owned the 13 colonies before America did? I'll give everyone a couple more seconds to answer. See if anyone knows. Just write it in the chat. Excellent. All right, the correct answer is Great Britain. So Great Britain owned the New England colonies. Now, what is confusing, okay, is Great Britain is the combination of like 4 or 5 countries. One of them happens to be called England. So the fact that you said New England isn't correct, but I could see maybe why you could be a little confused, because one of the major countries in Great Britain is the country of England. Okay, and that's why when they got to Yeah, it's almost the same. Okay, so if you can imagine, England, okay, is the country. When the people from England came to the New World, they named the region New England. I mean, it should make sense when it's all said and done. Okay, so Great Britain sometimes gets called England. It just, that's how it goes sometimes. Okay, so these are notes we got to copy down. What was Great Britain's economic policy over the colonists? First off, we need to have a discussion of what an economic policy is. So economic policy, I'm going to write in the chat. You don't need to write this down. Economic means money. Okay, so an economic policy is how a country makes money for itself. All right. And the way that Great Britain made money for itself was through something called mercantilism. All right. So this would be really helpful if you were in class with me and I had a map and I could show you where Great Britain is. But instead, what I've done is I'm going to go back and forth between some slides. I know you're not done. Okay. I want to just show you something quick. Okay. Great Britain, if you follow my mouse, is located right here. It's not generally very big. But I want you to notice something if you're looking at this map here. Okay, you have a British soldier holding a British flag. Look at where Britain is also located and where they have colonies around the world. You see, obviously, North America in the United States. You see South America. You see southern parts of Africa, Asia, and Australia. They are located in the 1700s all around the world. They have colonies all over the place. So since they have such a large range in the entire world, even though their country is very small, they have large power of colonies all over the place. Okay? So they decide the best way for their country to make money is to make money from the colonies as well as money from their homeland. Okay? So Great Britain had this economic policy of mercantilism over the colonists in America. So I'm going to read the definition. You're not going to probably understand it. All right, but we need to just kind of get a general sense of what it is. All right, so mercantilism is the process in which colonies, okay, and I put in parentheses America because the only colony we're concerned about at this point is the future United States of America, is the 13 colonies. So it's a process in which, yes, Sydney, great question. Yes, you're always going to copy down what's in red. If it's in black, you don't need to copy it down. This is going along with the notes from the focus question. All right, so process in which the colonies in America provided raw materials. Okay, so let's now, actually, let me just read the rest of it. Okay, process in which colonies provided raw materials back to the mother country, which is Britain, for them to produce and sell back to the colonists and other countries around the world. Okay, so let's break it down. So first we need to look at what is a raw material. All right, so I'm going to bold the word so we know we're focusing on it. What is a raw material? Well, a raw material is something like a material that is found in the world that you could just find from the earth. Sometimes you may know that as a natural resource, but raw materials go into a lot more greater detail than that. Okay, raw materials can be kind of made from man a little bit, but raw materials are basically just stuff you would find around the world. Okay, so that could be something like wood. Okay, you walk around, you see a tree, you know that was not made by people. Okay, that was made by the earth. Okay, that is a raw material. All right, vegetables like, things like corn, meat from animals, those are raw materials. Tobacco, okay, these are crops that are raw materials. You can't go to certain places, okay, and have, let's say, tobacco. You can't go to certain places around the world like Africa and have corn, right? Raw materials can only be found in certain areas of the world. All right, so what's going to happen is the job of the colonies, and specifically of America, is we're going to provide those raw materials to Great Britain, okay? So let's take something like a pencil, okay? Pencil's made of many different things, many different raw materials, okay? When you combine a lot of the raw materials to make a pencil, you are producing a pencil, or you are producing what's called a good. Okay, a good is something that you can trade and sell and is of use for people when they are using it. Okay, when you get a block of wood, It's literally just a block of wood. Okay. Right now, I am on a desk made of wood. Okay. The earth did not make the desk on its own. We produced the desk. It became a good. So my point is that in our country in 2020, if you want to make a product, you can make a product. Okay. Your phone, your wallet, the desk you're on at home, the laptop, those are all products that were made by companies. Picture back in the 1700s, people in America were not allowed to produce their own goods. Okay, so here's how it worked, okay? So I'm gonna go back to these pictures. Follow right here, okay? So let's say the colony of the 13 colonies. We're going to give our raw materials to the mother country, okay? In exchange, they're going to protect us. They're going to make sure we don't get attacked. All right, they're going to make sure we're protected. And in exchange, they're going to take those raw materials, they're going to produce goods, and then they're going to sell it to the rest of the world. They're going to sell it to other colonies. They're going to sell it back to us. All right, so that was the British economic policy of mercantilism. If you have any questions, because I can't see the looks on your faces if you're confused, if you have any questions, please write that down. Please write down the question in the chat or unmute yourself. All right, so this was Britain's economic policy with the United States at the time. I shouldn't call it the United States. It's 13 colonies at the time. Okay? So this is how they ran their country. This is how the 13 colonies were kind of ran. Now, here's the tricky thing, and this is why it's confusing. For a span of about 50 to 60 years, Britain never followed their own policy. So if you were living in the colonies, you knew this was a rule. You knew you had to provide the raw materials for Great Britain, but no one in the colonies listened. Okay, it's like a rule where I have in class, like there's technically no gum chewing, but if I never bother anyone about chewing gum, people are going to chew gum, right? So what happens is people in the colonies know this is a rule, but no one listens to the rule. No one listens to the economic policy. So let me explain what happens. What changed for the colonists after the French and Indian War? So we'll talk about the French and Indian War in a second, okay? So before and during the French and Indian War, colonists were making a good living and becoming very wealthy living in the colonies because Great Britain was very relaxed in allowing colonists to produce their own goods. So let's use the forest for an example. Okay, the forest has a lot of trees. It has a lot of raw materials of wood. What a lot of the colonists were doing was they were producing and making their own houses, right? They were building their own houses. They were producing their own products with wood. They were not selling the wood to Great Britain for them just to sell back. Okay, so the colonists started to have their own type of way of living through their own wealth and prosperity because Great Britain wasn't bothering them. They were getting the best of both worlds. Great Britain was protecting the colonies. They were under the British control, but the people in the colonies were able to make their own money. This relaxed policy by the British, letting the colonists produce their own goods, make their own taxes, and create their own laws, is called salutary neglect. Now, if you know someone or something that is neglected, okay, that means they are not paid attention to. You may feel if you have a brother or sister, your brother or sister gets a lot more attention, and you may say, I've been neglected. But neglected is a very serious word. Neglect means that you're not being paid attention to and not being given the proper care. So salutary neglect means that the colonists were not being treated in a way where they had, they were being fully controlled by Britain. So this was pretty good for the colonists. So during the salutary neglect period, colonists could sell their own products and trade with other colonies and countries. All right, so this was very good for the colonists at the time. So for 30, 40, 50 years, colonists are getting used to living their life in a certain way. Just like you would in class if for, every day you're chewing gum and Mr. Panio's not bothering you, okay? You're fine. You're going to keep chewing gum. It's not really a big deal to you, and it's not really a big deal to Mr. Panio. You're going to keep doing it. So this is what happens. But things do not stay perfect for the colonists for a very long period of time, because there's going to be a situation called the French and Indian War where things are going to change. Okay. And like Sydney said, okay, you're only going to copy down what's in red. Okay. I'll give everyone another 10, 15 seconds to finish this. All right. So there's two terms you're really looking at here. You have mercantilism, you have salutary neglect. These are your two big vocabulary words. We'll clarify with some of this when we get to the reading soon. All right. But we have an event called the French and Indian War, which you learned in 7th grade, which I'll re-go over quickly. Which we'll see some videos on a little bit later, but we're just going to break down kind of a couple of things here. All right, so only copy down what's in red. So what was the French and Indian War? We don't really need to go into the details of the war. But this is a flag of Great Britain, and this is a flag of France. They are big-time rivals throughout the mid and late 1700s. Okay, so we have a war fought in the 13 colonies. Okay, we have a war fought in the 13 colonies, okay, from 1754 to 1763. This is before the United States was involved. We get it from Great Britain's perspective. So Great Britain says, okay, we are fighting against the French and we are fighting against the Indians, so they call it the French and Indian War, okay? They fought because both countries wanted control of the colonies in North America. So basically, Britain is fighting for full control of the 13 colonies, as is France. Long story short, okay, even though it took 9 years, it was a long war, Great Britain won the long war by sending more men than the French had to fight in the colonies. They wanted the colonies more, so eventually they won the war. Okay, this is 7th grade stuff. This is world history stuff, not something you need to know. However, we do need to know the results, so make sure you copy that down. The result was a treaty called the Treaty of Paris in 1763. Now, spoiler alert, there's a lot of treaties of Paris in American history. This just happens to be the first one. What they did was they met in Paris, France, between Britain and France, and they're going to come up with a treaty. A treaty is an agreement to stop war between fighting nations. And the agreements of the treaty were, it gave almost all control of North America to the British Empire. So Britain now had full control of the 13 colonies. But it comes with a big however. And the big however is the reason why the conflict between the 13 colonies and the Americans eventually get into problems with Great Britain. Wars are extremely expensive, especially back during the 1700s. This war was incredibly expensive for Great Britain. And that price, that debt that Great Britain's going to develop is what causes the major problem and the major start of the issues between Great Britain and 13 colonies. If you remember from 7th grade, these are the events leading to the American Revolution and the Revolutionary War. This is just step one, okay? So let's talk about a couple of things as we go back to some photos. Okay, if I'm going too fast and you need me to slow down, just let me know, or unmute yourself and let me know, but I think we should be okay. So going back to these photos, let's look back at mercantilism. This is a good political cartoon to help you understand. You have the mother country, okay, which obviously you have a queen-like, king-like finger here. You have a monarch, okay? The mother country in this case we know is Great Britain. They're the ones that are in control of the colonies, okay? Even though the size of Great Britain is smaller than the 13 colonies, they are more powerful, okay? And what do you have here? You almost have this setting, and it's good because Britain does have a monarchy. They do have a king or a queen, but you have this setting where you have these servants, which are kind of representative of the colonies, bringing these types of food to the queen, in this case, to eat. But it's a political cartoon, so it's not necessarily food. It's going to be gold and silver, foodstuffs, and raw materials. The colonies are the ones bringing them to the mother country. The mother country takes in the raw materials, and then they produce the goods to everyone else. The colonies work for the mother country, okay? And in a lot of cases, that's not necessarily freedom. That's not necessarily what our country was built off of, but that is how it starts there. All right, we have one more slide, and then we will get to the reading. So how did the British fix their debt from the French and Indian War? So debt is another word to essentially say that Britain owed a lot of money, okay? Since Britain owed a lot of money, All right. They decided to fix their debt in a really interesting way. Now, the way you learned in 7th grade, and we will spend time on this, tomorrow and stuff, was they taxed the colonists. You may remember things. Okay, we don't have time to do the turn and talk. Plus, we're also remote. So, what are some taxes that you remember from last year? If you do remember some taxes and you want to write them in the chat, that would be really helpful. But we'll go over a lot of the taxes that the British put onto the colonists. All right, but you may remember certain things such as the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, the Tea Act. Okay, and what those were taxes put on the colonists to help pay back the British the money from the French and Indian War. Now, it's a really messed up situation when you really think about it, because Great Britain at this point in time fought the war without the consent of the colonies. They fought to win the 13 colonies' control, but now they're going to make the colonists pay for the war. And it's almost a little messed up because the colonists weren't the ones fighting in it. The British soldiers were versus the French. So it became a very annoying point for the colonists to say, why do we have to pay these taxes for this war that we want to know part of? Okay. And the problem is, since we're not at this point in time in a republic, we're under British control, which is led by a king. No one can tell the king what to do. The king is the one making these decisions. So you would have learned about this in 7th grade, but what you probably didn't learn about was this part in red. Britain got much stricter control. It wasn't just the taxes. They got much stricter control on the colonists after the French and Indian War. What they did was they stopped salutary neglect. They stopped not paying attention to the colonies and letting them do their own thing. And they started forcing colonists returning back to strict mercantilism and sell their goods to Britain. So if you were an artisan back during the 1700s in the colonies, and let's say, we'll take desks. Let's say you're selling desks to people. Okay, you're the one getting the raw materials of wood, you're producing a desk, and you're selling it out to people. Let's say that's the case back then. All of a sudden, when the French and Indian War ends, you're no longer allowed to do that. You now have to sell the raw material of wood to Great Britain, and guess what happens now? You're now losing out on a lot of money, because the way you make money is not by selling a raw material. The way you make money is by selling a good. What good is it if I just sell the leather of a wallet, which I have right here, without the actual wallet? That means people are going to have to make their own things. So producing the goods is the way you could really make a lot of money. So now a lot of colonists are making less money, and this makes them very unhappy, as you can imagine. Okay? And using that gum chewing example again, ladies and gentlemen, it's like now me saying in the middle of February, after 5 months of school, never busting anyone's chops about chewing gum, and I come in and I start screaming at people, you can't chew gum in this class, there's no way you can be doing this, this is a rule, it's been a rule the whole time, everyone spit out your gum now. You're gonna be like, whoa, 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 chill. I've been chewing gum for the last 5 months, why are you busting my chops now? All right, so that's essentially what happens. The colonists get this built up anger towards Great Britain because they're now in control after the French and Indian War. They're being a lot stricter with mercantilism. They're now taxing the colonists, and this is going to make the colonists really angry. There will be many other things that make the colonists angry. This is just the start of it. We're going to go into some other things soon, okay? What we're going to do now is, if you're not done copying, I'll give you another 30 seconds, but if you are, we're going to pivot to the Google Classroom, where I'm going to kind of share with you the reading and the questions. It should be pretty straightforward. It's usual, your questions, usual reading and questions sort of thing. Just, I throw the Regents questions down on the PowerPoint slides today, so I want to go over that with you. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to start sharing something else. If you have any questions, please let me know. All right, so I'm going to go to this and this. Okay. So you're now going to see me presenting the Google Classroom, and what you'll see on the Google Classroom is you have a reading on mercantilism, some of the stuff we talked about, but you get a really good map here of something called the triangular trade. okay, where you're going to get raw materials like sugar, cotton, tobacco going to Great Britain. They're going to produce manufactured goods. Okay, they're going to make those goods out of the raw materials, and they're going to sell them to around the world. And what do we get in exchange? We get African slaves to come to the Caribbean islands and come to places like North America. So this is called the triangular trade. You'll see some of this in the reading. But you're going to complete the reading. I took these questions here. Okay, I made it nice and easy for you. All right, I ended up putting them onto a Google Doc. Okay, you're just going to do the reading, answer the 4 questions, and then you have 3 Regents-style questions. All you need to do is highlight or bold the correct answer, and then you should be good from there. All right, so I'm going to mute my mic. Please let me know if you have any questions. Write in the chat or unmute yourself. You have a total of around 11 or 12 minutes. I think if you work hard, you can get this done. If not, you're just going to finish it up for homework, okay, and go from there. All right? So I'm going to mute myself. Let me know if you have questions.